Hey everybody, Ron Bielefeld, Whistling Wings Photography. Welcome to another video. Hey, it's kingfisher season here in Florida, Central Florida, East Central Florida, if you want to be really specific about it. And I wait for this time of year every year because I love photographing belted kingfishers. They're one of the fastest and hardest subjects out there when it comes to birds. Very skittish, as those of you know who have tried to photograph belted kingfishers. And that's not what this video is about. Well, it's kind of about kingfishers, but it's really about the Canon R5 Mk and the autofocus system on this camera. I've been waiting for kingfishers to try out the R5 Mk because they are some of the fastest. They're not very big. Hey, if the Canon R5 Mk autofocus system can keep up with a belted kingfisher diving, takes them maybe a second and a half to go down, hit the water, come back up on a dive, coming right at me, right at the camera. If it can keep up with that, then we've got a system here that, I don't know of much else that's quicker. Gaining on the camera, diving straight out, whatever. Super fast, super close, which makes the speed all that more difficult to deal with when it comes to the autofocus of a camera. And so I've been out doing kingfishers with the R5 Mk, and how did it do? There was a lot of question about whether the R5 Mk is going to run, let's say, the servos, the motors in the 600 f4 RF as fast as, say, the R3 with the bigger battery in that camera, higher voltage. Is it going to run both motors? Is it going to be as fast? You know what? I said in a previous video, I don't care what it's doing in here. If it's running both, if it's fast, if it's accurate, then that's all that matters. Well, this is the test. For me, anyway, and if you want to see how it went, stay tuned. Okay, so here we are. We're talking about the Canon R5 Mk and the speed of the autofocus system. This was all done with the 600 f4 RF. So keep that in mind. Be aware of that. And settings on the camera. Hey, I figured out a couple different settings that I'm going to use for really fast subjects. So that's coming up too. But let's take a look at what I did to test the R5 Mk2's autofocus speed. Can it keep up with something gaining really fast on the camera? And we use belted kingfishers for that. And here we go. We can take a look at some images. I'll just ruin it right now. It did amazingly well. Better than any camera I have used. And that includes the R3, the Sony A1, the Nikon Z8. It doesn't, again, I don't do Canon versus Sony versus Nikon. They're all great cameras. They're all super capable. I'm just saying that the Canon R5 Mk2, everything taken into account, the usability, eye detection, zone, and that's principally what I used for the really close stuff when this bird was coming in and diving 10 feet away, on the edge of the minimum focus distance of this lens on this camera. It was keeping up. It was doing a great job. I was using eye detection for that. When the bird was a little bit further away, I was using a lot of zone. It worked great. You can take a look at image after image after image, and they're sharp. Before these cameras came out with these autofocus systems, when we're using digital SLRs, when you had to keep one little autofocus point in the middle of the frame on the bird, I was lucky to come home with 2 or 3 series of dives where I kept it on the bird and I had a good series of sharp images. Now, if these cameras miss, it's amazing. So image after image after image in poor light. This camera, again, the autofocus system is better in poor light at keeping focus, even on fast approaching subjects, fast subjects in general, flying, even if they're just going left and right. The best I've ever used. Got the R1 coming up. We'll see how that does. But anyway, really, really impressed with this. Again, image after image after image. I've got hundreds. The bird just showed up. I just started, and I've only been out for a few days, and I've got hundreds of images of this bird diving. And it's just good. It's just really, really good. I couldn't be happier. And all of this at 45 megapixels, not 24 megapixels. Everybody talks about needing 45 megapixels for birds because you need to crop when you shoot birds. You do a lot of times need to crop when you shoot birds, but you don't always need to crop, and I'm not cropping much here. All of these images are almost full frame. Composition, crop, a crop for composition, that's it. The detail with 45 megapixels, with all of those pixels on your subject, the R5 Mark II is really, really nice. So, I'm super impressed with the autofocus system of the R5 Mark II. Now, getting beyond what we just talked about, I found a couple settings that I'm changing in the R5 Mark II from my previous videos for this, for really fast subjects, really erratic subjects. This kingfisher is starting its dives, pulling up, putting on the air brakes, and then power diving, doing all sorts of erratic stuff, going down, gonna dive, nope, decides not to. You know, those kinds of things, real erratic and fast. I have been using the auto setting for cases. For the case, the old cases that we used to have for the autofocus, now it's just auto and manual. And I have been using the auto because I use the auto in the R5, I use the auto setting in the R3, and I liked it. But for this extreme case, I decided to try something different. I went back to my old way of doing it. I put it in manual, and I took the tracking sensitivity and the XL decel tracking, and I put the tracking sensitivity all the way to the left, all the way negative, and the XL decel all the way to the positive. Bird starting and stopping and doing lots of erratic stuff. I was doing better. The autofocus, the camera was doing better with the manual settings versus auto. Again, in this extreme case of super fast, super erratic subjects, very close to the photographer. That's one change that I've made. The other thing that I've noticed, the 600 f4 RF has 3 IBIS modes. Modes 1, 2, and 3. Imagine that. Well, so does the 100 to 500 and a lot of other lenses. I almost never have used mode 3 because I just didn't really think it fit anything well. And if I did think it would fit, it didn't really, I didn't like it. So I use mode 2 for panning. Or I'd turn it off if I had fast enough shutter speeds. Guess what? I tried mode 2 with this camera now, the R5 Mark II, and this lens, the RF600 f4, and mode 3 with the erratic. That's what it's for erratic stop and starting type subjects. You don't get any benefit of a stabilized viewfinder, but then again, when you're doing this, and then you know, you're starting and you're all over the place trying to keep up with this bird, it's not trying to counteract any of that stuff either if you were in mode 2. Nice and smooth, then you go up, or nice and smooth, and you go down. That initial movement down or up, it's not good if you're in mode 2 because it will try to counteract that for a split second. And those are the shots you really want. Those really dynamic changes is when the tails are spread, when the wings are flared, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, mode 3, I like it for this scenario again. Pretty dramatic changes in speed and direction. Pretty dramatic shooting scenario on the R5 Mark II and the RF600 f4, I like mode 3. I just leave it on. I don't care what shutter speed I'm shooting. My hit rate has gone up. Not a lot, but slightly. I noticed a difference. So those are the two changes I've made for this very different shooting scenario, I guess. But I know a lot of you get into these scenarios where you've got small, fat things gaining, changing speeds, changing direction. Try mode 3 on the R5 Mark II with the 600 f4. Bet you it'll probably do pretty well on the 100 to 500 too. Haven't tried it yet because the 600 is really needed out here doing kingfisher work because of the f4. It's dark out there when the bird first arrives.
Bright and early.
So I'm using the 600 f4. 200 to 800 doesn't have mode 1, mode 2, and mode 3 for the IS-IBIS settings. Haven't tried that lens yet. I'm going to. But I just wanted to do this video and get this out to you that if you have any reservation at all about getting the R5 Mark II, I can guarantee you the R5 is not doing this stuff. You've been looking at these images. You can go on my SmugMug site, down in the description of the video, I've got a link. All these images are up there. The R5 Mark II it's not doing it. It's not going to make these shots. You'll get 1 or 2 out of there. The R3, yes, doing pretty well on these, but not as good as the R5 Mark II. It's not. I've said it in my past videos on the R5 Mark II, comparing it to the R3's autofocus system. The R5 Mark II has a better autofocus system than the R3. It's supposed to be the same autofocus system. I guess it is the same autofocus system, but it's been tweaked or something because it does better. Now, I mentioned the R1, and that's coming out soon. And I'll be getting one as soon as I possibly can. And then I will try the R1 in this scenario because the kingfisher, I hope, will be around all winter long. And so now I will be pitting the R5 Mark II right up against the R1 over the winter, and we're going to see how it does. And then we'll get into the whole detail thing between 24 megapixels in the R1 and 45 in the R5 Mark II, big in the frame. I'm not talking about cropping. This is not the comparison I want to make here. The comparison I want to make is there a difference in the detail that's rendered between the R5 Mark II when the bird's big in the frame and the R1 when the bird's big in the frame? Fast moving stuff here. I'm not talking about static stuff. I don't care about taking pictures of a bunch of junk on some shelves in low light and high. I don't know. This is in the field with these fast moving subjects. What does megapixels matter? Dude, I'm going to have the bird same size in the frame with the R1 and the R5 Mark II. One with 45 megapixels, so it's going to be a lot more pixels on that bird than the R1's going to give me. Can I see a difference in the resolution, in the detail that's rendered on the bird? Because that's what's important to me. So, there we go. Got that to look forward to. What else can we talk about? Nothing, I guess. With respect to this. It's just, I wanted to talk to you all again. I wanted to get out there and say that I continue to be, all this initial stuff, my initial impressions after only having the camera for a few weeks or a month. I don't know how many images I've taken on the R5 Mark II so far. And these are all with the electronic shutter, by the way. And I see no rolling shutter artifacts in this bird's wings. Now, it's not a hummingbird. Okay, and I personally haven't shot the R5 Mark II for hummingbirds yet. I was hoping to get down to Costa Rica and do that. I haven't been able to. I've been too busy. But the wingtips of a belted kingfisher, when it's doing a power dive, are moving really fast through the frame. And I've seen in the past, with the R5 especially, rolling shutter artifacts in the wingtips of belted kingfishers when I'm looking at my images, and even kind of a weird artifact you'd see every once in a while on the R3, a little bit of weird banding in the wingtips that were moving really fast. I have seen none of that with the R5 Mark II. So, rolling shutter so far is looking really, really good on the R5 Mark II with the electronic shutter. So there we go. Hey, I hope you find these videos helpful, informative. If you do, please subscribe to my channel. I'd like to get my subscriptions up because, 13,000 subscribers, 14,000 almost now after years of doing this. I get it. Okay, whatever. I'd like to see that go up. It helps me continue to do these videos because they do take time. They do take away from other things that I could be doing. So I'd like to see that. Please subscribe. It makes me feel good too. I hope you're having great light. I hope you're getting great images. Be safe out there. I'll see you soon.